Social Media University. Rob, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm super excited about this one because I've had the honor and privilege of being in a bunch of clubhouse rooms with you, and so many of the things you've said, I'm like, oh my god, I've never even thought of that. So there's so much value that's going to be in this episode. But at first, I would love for you to give the elevator pitch. What's Rob? What's he all about? What does he do?
Sure. I'm an advertising attorney. I focus on e-commerce and social media marketing issues. So I represent brands, agencies, and individual creators and influencers, and I help them understand legal risks of operating and selling things online. And I do contract drafting, review, deal negotiation, that kind of thing. And I focus on FTC compliance and other consumer protection compliance issues. So if you make money online, I try to help you keep it and not spend it on litigation.
That's awesome. So, uh, I, two questions there. The first is, why did you choose this field? And then after, I would like for you to explain what the FTC is, because there's a lot of people, there's too few people that know what that is.
Sure. Yeah. So my path to where I am now, right out of law school, I was fortunate to get a job in LA at a large international law firm. I was there for about 6.5 years. And when I was there, I was in the litigation department. So it was litigating 100% of the time. There was like no part of the day that wasn't involved in some active lawsuit or potential lawsuit that was imminent. And when you work at a big firm, you get exposed to a lot of different practice areas. It's pretty rare that somebody comes in and knows, I'm going to specialize in securities litigation 100% of the time. And a lot of times it's
Mm.
not even up to you if you decided to choose that at first. So you bounce around a bit and you learn what you like and what you don't like. And a lot of what we did in that office and what I enjoyed more than some other areas was we did a lot of class action defense for large companies. And especially in California, a lot of class actions have to do with false advertising issues, whether it's consumer products or other online ads. It's California is the most, I think it's fair to say, consumer friendly, or you could say business unfriendly state in terms of the laws on the books that are supposed to help consumers avoid being deceived, basically. So most of my time was spent defending those kinds of cases. And as time went on, we had more clients approach us to try to avoid litigation in the first place, which is sometimes the role of an in-house attorney and or a general counsel, but they still wanted, for example, a video game company is going to launch a new game, and they would send over the TV spots that they're going to run to have us review it, identify what the risks are, and propose revisions if we thought they were appropriate and things like that. And I really enjoyed doing that, especially because to me it was more satisfying to help a client be able to just focus on their business and not try to
Mhm.
dig them out of a bad situation. Clients are a lot happier when they're not in the middle of a lawsuit anyway,
Yeah.
so it's kind of a more pleasant interaction. But it's also it was just more fun for me to be sort of on the front lines is not the right way to put it, but
Mhm.
it's more sort of cutting edge work as methods that are popular for marketing online change, different strategies and tactics evolve as platforms and media on which you can advertise evolve. And it was fun to identify those issues and help big, household name brands avoid them in the first place. So
Yeah.
ultimately, I decided staying at a huge law firm like that was just not what was going to be the most satisfying career path for me. So um, I thought about knowing that I wanted to start my own firm and try to build something myself. What would be the most satisfying work for me to try to go after? And I thought to myself, if I could just do that sort of compliance consulting type work full time, that would be amazing. I still litigate
Mhm.
probably 40 to 50% of the work that I do, just because I have so much experience with it and it comes up so often. I mean, if you're in business long enough, you're going to get sued eventually. It's going
Yeah.
to happen. And so I still do a fair amount of it, but I've been fortunate to be able to focus on what I wanted to focus on in just a couple years of having my own firm here. So it's evolved. I didn't really set out to become uh, to focus on social media marketing specifically. It's one of those
Mhm.
things where a couple clients had specific questions and needs in that area. And the more I learned about really the detailed aspects of how marketing laws apply on social media, the more I realized there's so much there to work with and so much to dig into. And it's just inherently interesting to me. And so again, it's worked out well, and I'm fortunate that there's enough work within that area of interest that it's been great, and it's fun to work with clients in that space. I feel like I relate to them a bit, more entrepreneurial clients. The most entrepreneurial thing a lawyer can do is leave a firm and start their own firm. So I feel like I admire a lot of my clients for sharing that element of their personality, and yeah, it's the ideal situation for me practicing law.
That's amazing. And so the second question I had was can you say what the FTC is and
Oh,
explain why
right,
it's
right,
important?
right. Yeah, the FTC is at the national level, the federal regulator that's basically charged with policing what most of us think of as false advertising.
Mm.
So I'm licensed in California. I know California law pretty much inside and out, I think is fair to say. Uh, but most of the content I put out on social media focuses on the FTC because it applies no matter where you are in the US. And even if you're a business abroad that's directing your
Operating.
advertising to US customers, you have to be aware of the FTC guidelines also. And the FTC does other things in addition to policing what we would commonly call false advertising. But when you think about false advertising regulation, generally in the e-commerce consumer space in the US, you're looking at the FTC as the agency that you have to watch out for and the agency that comes up with the rules that most states derive their own individual rules from.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking back to what I said in the little intro there, where I was talking about how we've been on Clubhouse calls, you brought up things that I had never even thought of to even really ask, let alone think that they'd be an issue. And one of them was the fact that like fake followers could potentially be a legal situation or a legal battle. Could you speak to why that may be a problem if someone, say, a brand were to buy fake followers?
Yeah, so this starting point is it's helpful to understand why an agency like the FTC would think of that as a potential problem in the first place, and then you can see what they've done about it and what they've said about it. Part of the FTC's mission in terms of protecting people from false advertising is the concept that a consumer is supposed to know when they're being advertised to.
Mhm.
The issue with the way that relates to influencer marketing is a big part of the value of influencer marketing is that it doesn't feel like advertising. Like that's the whole value. It feels like you're getting a word of mouth referral from somebody that you either know or like a lot, and it's not like a television commercial. So there's that tension between the objective of influencer marketing versus the FTC's objective of making sure that everyone understands when sponsored content is sponsored and when a brand's behind it and when there's a connection between somebody making an endorsement and the brand itself. So the concept of the fake like or fake follower count, the premise is basically if the average customer looks at two brands and let's say they both make t-shirts or something, and you've got one t-shirt brand with 1,000 real followers, and then you have another t-shirt brand that maybe has a little bit slicker Instagram presence, basically the same product, and they've got, 1 million followers. The concern is the average person is going to think, you know, 1 million people endorse this shirt company. They must be doing something right. It's like McDonald's,
Mm,
like millions served. Well, that's an endorsement in the eyes of the FTC. And so if those don't reflect like those don't reflect the honest belief of 1 million people, then there's
mm,
the risk of consumer deception. So the fake follower thing is an issue that's developed recently, and it's not, there's only sort of one black and white line that was drawn. The FTC, following the New York Attorney General, sued a company called Devumi that was in the business of selling fake likes and fake followers.
mm,
What they were doing, though, it's not the fake follower in that case was about as fake as a follower could be. They were like bot accounts. They weren't linked to any real person. So it's not like a situation with a loop giveaway where you get a bunch of followers who maybe don't care about your content, but at least they're real people. These are just fake software accounts. And in that case, the FTC issued a statement that said buying and selling fake followers is illegal. It undermines the marketplace and so on. They didn't define, this is what we're calling a fake follower, but in that case, it was not tied to a real person. So
Yeah.
the most we can say right now that for sure the FTC would find illegal is like truly fake accounts, buying or selling those that the FTC deems to be illegal. But the interesting question then is like, well, what else could you call a fake follower? In my opinion, I think you could have a good argument that if I start my t-shirt brand, I don't have any sales, but I participated in a loop giveaway and I get 70,000 followers overnight. None of those people have tried my product. None of those
No.
people actually care about the shirt. They all wanted to win a handbag or something. So why is that any different from 70,000 accounts that aren't linked to real people?
Hmm.
There hasn't been a court case or anything that's gotten into it in that level, but I think that we probably will see more attention to that issue, and it probably will get fleshed out as time goes on. But that's the concern. Is your follower count a false or misleading reflection of endorsements?
Yeah. And so many people have done loop giveaways and still can continue to this day. So I could see that becoming a real serious issue. And a lot of people resort to that because it is difficult to grow, especially on Instagram, and they want a
Hmm.
quick fix. But and especially because like this, that's definitely true for people who kind of have like not a sexy offering. And I would say that you fall into that wing of people who like wouldn't conventionally scream success on social media, but you've built
Right.
a very active following, even in your specialized field. So, can you speak to that a bit and share your expertise in terms of how you actually went about growing that very engaged audience while being a lawyer, which isn't all that sexy?
Yeah, it's something that truly every day I think to myself, like, is what am I missing? Why do people actually engage with this? Because you're right. It's like, who are people? It just amazes me that people will actually take the time to stop scrolling and read some legal news or something that I'm covering. I mean, it's
Mhm.
awesome. Uh, I can only sort of give educated guesses as to why people actually want to engage with it. So I've gotten a fair amount of feedback. I started having just a conversation with someone at a networking event who I had mentioned I was focusing on social media marketing issues. The guy asked to see my Instagram. At the time, I only had like 3 posts. I didn't. It was new. I didn't know what I was doing on it. So it's one of those things where I'm studying the subject matter, but I'm not in it yet. And
Mhm.
he was like, well, you need to have a better Instagram presence. And he said, he referred me to this CPA, Tyler McBroom, who's got like 130,000 followers on Instagram. And what Tyler did and still does is he posts like 1 minute videos about business tax tips or even just a static image like with an exotic car or something. And he talks about deducting your car as a tax expense and so on. And my friend was like, just start trying that and see what happens. So that's what I did. I thought I took issues that came up, not naming names or anything, but issues that come up over and over again from clients, or the FTC just brought this lawsuit. What is that about? Or the celebrity got in trouble for something that I've seen clients get in trouble for, and just make like 1 minute videos and then a longer caption trying to summarize what the issue is and like what the takeaway is. And uh, so the combination of putting out content in that it's long enough where people are going to watch a minute, but probably not longer than that. And then if they want to learn more, I get into it a bit in the caption. And
Mm.
then it was there's a luck element to it. I mean, I before COVID, I was fortunate to be invited to speak at a lot of in-person and not a lot, a handful of in-person events and made a lot of really good connections at those events. And the thing about social media is there's somebody that, I mean, there's multiple examples I can think of where I'm introduced to somebody, we stay in touch in DMs. I realize that this person has, a massive following on Instagram I didn't even realize at the time.
Mm.
And we stay in touch, and there's an issue that comes up that affects them, and they share my content. And that's really when the traction started um, escalating, I guess you could say, because I mean, it's just so helpful to have someone organically repost or reshare your content without asking for
Mhm.
anything and without giving anything. Because getting back to the concept of the endorsement, it's like this is somebody that obviously has an established and good presence. And it was the right kind of people sharing my stuff. It wasn't like, huge, questionably authentic accounts. It was like people who were established social media players. And that was incredibly helpful because so many other people see it and it lends legitimacy to the content I was putting out. And it's encouraging. And the more people see it, the more people see it, and so on. So I think it's a
The
combo of
compound.
what I've heard from people is, and I don't like to. It sounds like I'm self-congratulating myself, but what people have told me is that uh, legal issues like that, no one really wants to read them on their own, and the
Mm.
content I put out apparently does an effective job of making it simple and applying it to real life, so that there's so many people I know who are either established in the e-commerce business or they're interested in it because there's so much hype around different aspects of getting into it, and there's all levels to it. But a lot of people I think are either curious about, well, can I do this, or what if I share this,
Mm.
or oh, I should really watch out for that in my next campaign. That it's helpful for people to have it digested for them, basically. So it's a combo of
Yeah.
that and then just luck having having knowing the right or getting to know the right people by networking pretty aggressively.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, if your content is good enough, I think people will reshare it without you having to ask or even suggesting it. And then it just goes from there.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I love about what you did is you didn't try to overthink it, and you also didn't come into it with any expectations. And I think that's why the results have been so positive because you just focused on making something that's difficult to consume, very consumable, and that in and of itself is extremely valuable. And then you kind of let the content talk for itself. So if anybody's listening to this and they want to follow you, what's your Instagram account?
It's at Robert Freund Law. So it's kind of a long handle, but yeah, it's just my full name and then law at the end.
Okay, amazing. So that'll be linked in the description box or show notes, depending how you're consuming this. So the next question I have for you is something that, like, I think anybody who researches like making money online, one of the first things that they come across is drop shipping. And I've heard you talk a few different times about drop shipping and the potential legal issues that that creates. Can you speak to some of those and why it could be potentially dangerous to get involved with?
Yeah, I mean, drop shipping as a business model, there's nothing inherently illegal or unlawful about doing that. It's been around for a while. Some people have had incredible success with it, but it's sort of become a meme, and I think a lot of people have pitched it either intentionally or unintentionally as like this is the simple way to just get started and you can make money and you don't really have to do very much work. In my opinion, it's not a sustainable way to build a brand for yourself. I mean, you can only, especially today, because it's so saturated, like everyone can figure out basically how to drop ship from AliExpress on YouTube in an hour if they want to learn the basics. So it's super saturated and it's hard to get traction in the first place. And it can only carry you so far. I mean, how much of a real brand can you really build on if you're just drop shipping the same or one of the same products that 100 competitors are drop shipping.
Mhm.
So there, I mean, I wouldn't discourage anybody from looking into it, and people are still making it work. And like I said, there's nothing like illegal about the concept of not storing your own inventory. But I think
Okay.
people get into trouble with, well, one of the issues, especially with COVID right now, is shipping times. You need to
Mhm.
be able to either ensure that you can meet the shipping deadline you're advertising. And without getting too into the weeds of why that's an issue, essentially, if you don't advertise a shipping window, then the default is you got to ship your products out within 30 days of somebody ordering it. This is one of those FTC rules that applies no matter where you are in the country. Some states have even more requirements, but the default is if you don't say, ships within 2 months, then or whatever amount of time, then you need to get it out within 30 days. And if you realize you're not going to be able to do that, there's very specific language you have to send to the customer in an email telling them about a new shipping window, giving them the ability to cancel it, And then if you can't meet the second window, there's a different email you have to send out. And you need affirmative consent to keep waiting and so on. And so if you there's that kind of issue is something that the FTC pays a lot of attention to, and some businesses have been hurt or stung pretty badly by not complying with that. And that's one of those things that I think people who are eager to get into business and the concept of being an entrepreneur and having your own business, it's so easy to just set up a Shopify store and use their sort of template terms of service and get some graphic design done and figure out your products and not think about, what happens if I don't ship out when I say I'm going to? And it's just an issue of not having the information out there for people. So that's one aspect of it is just fulfillment. Are you going to be able to fulfill all these orders? How well can you really control your logistics chain if you're relying on whoever's shipping it across the world? And then the other thing is sort of related to that eagerness to get ahead of your competition and use really aggressive marketing tactics. There's so many different ways that marketers can overly aggressively market products. So like there's rules about running sales. You can't just have a price marked down from something that you think the value of the product is. Like you have to have
Yeah,
sold
like an
it at that
arbitrary
higher price.
value.
Right. You can't do that. You can't run sales forever. You can't, say it has features it doesn't have. There's a whole range of things that I think a lot of people are just eager to get started. Think, okay, well, I'll get the sales and then I'll clean it up afterwards. And you're just really rolling the dice across a whole variety of issues there. And it's not just the FTC, like state law enforcement agencies are pretty active as well. I've seen smaller e-commerce stores that didn't have a lot of sales have to deal with an attorney general investigation. And even if there's
Wow.
no fines at the end of the day, you got to hire a lawyer for that. And it's scary and it's stressful. And and I think that because of all the hype around drop shipping, a lot of people who get into it are more susceptible to landing in that kind of situation just because those are the same people who were either pitched something that didn't advise them of these risks, or they're just so eager to start having the money come in that they're not thinking about what they need to have in place first.
Yeah. No, I think I've seen too many stories that fall under that category. And in hearing all the things that you're saying that you can't be doing, my mind went right to like a lot of these like fake gurus, the people who sell like courses promising the world. They do so many of those things. Like they'll put an arbitrary value and say it's 99% off. They'll like say that these results, they'll talk about these crazy results. So you've already stated that that's not allowed. How do they get away with that?
Yeah, that's a question I get all the time too. It's like, especially from brands that want to take a really aggressive marketing approach. And I should just note that what I tell my clients is I'm not there to say no to everything. If I just said like
Okay.
you can't do this because it has legal risk, you wouldn't be able to operate your business basically. Like I understand the appeal of getting those higher conversion rates being a little bit more aggressive. So what I try to do is just identify the risk and then it's ultimately a business decision as to how much legal risk you want to take on. But yeah, to answer that question, how do these people get away with it? There's a couple reasons. Number one, government resources are limited. The FTC tends to go after bigger fish where they think there's so much more consumer harm that it's worth it. Not always. They've gone after some smaller brands, especially CBD companies recently.
Mhm.
But yeah, national and state, they can't be everywhere. So it's
No.
just a matter of prioritizing. And then from the consumer standpoint, it's just luck. I mean, a lot of these things, if you had a motivated person who felt that they were harmed by whatever that tactic was, and they approached a plaintiff's lawyer, like it's just because that hasn't happened that you don't see
Mm.
more activity around that. But the other thing is we don't really know how much of that goes on because not every issue that you hire a lawyer for becomes a public court case. A lot of these things settle out before complaints are filed, or even if the lawsuit is initiated, it's not like everything goes to trial. It's like something like 2 or 3% of cases actually get tried. Everything else settles, and it's almost always confidential. So we don't really know how many of these people are getting peppered with lawsuits here and there.
Okay.
But yeah, it's resources and it's luck basically. But it does happen and it happens pretty frequently. We just don't always hear about it.
Okay. And so, as a consumer, if you were a victim of some of these tactics, like, do you report this to someone? Like, how does that proceeding take place?
Yeah, you've got a few options. You can leave a review with the Better Business Bureau. That's not a government agency, but if enough complaints stack up, the BBB will sometimes refer that to government agencies. And if you have a long
Okay.
track record of bad BBB reviews, then that can influence whether an agency is going to take a closer look. You can report consumer fraud to your state authorities. Every state differs a little bit, but most of them, at least California, I know for sure, has like an online portal to report consumer fraud. You can also file complaints directly with the FTC. So those are the sort of government routes you can take. But if you were defrauded, or even if you're not sure if you're concerned about that having happened, you can reach out to a plaintiff's attorney in your jurisdiction, and most of them will entertain a consult with you to say, this is worth pursuing or it's not. So those are the options.
Okay. Amazing. So, next point that I wanted to ask you about is influencer marketing is now it's massive. So, but there's increasing more regulations around that and what you have to disclose. So, the first question I'm going to ask is, what are those restrictions or things that you have to disclose when doing an influencer campaign?
Right. So disclosures, the responsibility for making a disclosure falls on the brand and the influencer. So
Okay,
the
both.
FTC's position is that compliance is everyone's responsibility. So if you have a campaign that involves a brand and an agency and an influencer, and there's a disclosure rule that's not complied with, everyone's potentially liable as far as the FTC is concerned, regardless of whatever contract you guys have between you. So I'll explain like what needs to be disclosed, but as a starting point, if I'm a brand and I have 100 influencers out there posting Instagram stories about my product, and one or two of them don't make the disclosure they have to, I'm potentially liable as the brand, which is why monitoring and compliance is such an important piece of running campaigns. So what needs to be disclosed is what the FTC calls a material connection between a brand and an influencer or some other endorser. So a material connection is one that would affect the weight or credibility that a consumer would give to that endorsement. So if I knew this, I would treat the endorsement differently. So it doesn't have to be just payment. Payment is one of those material connections. If I pay you to say that my coffee mugs are amazing, you would have to disclose that. Free product is a material connection too. Um, Things like sweepstakes entries or VIP access or some other perk is one. Employee employer relationship. If I'm talking about how great these mugs are, but I actually work for the mug company, that would need to be disclosed.
Okay.
Family relationships too. Like if I talk about how great a muffin brand is and my spouse owns the muffin company, I need to disclose that when I'm talking about how great that product is. So it's
Mm,
anything that the customer would not be, it's not obvious is there, and that if they knew it, it would affect how much weight they give to that endorsement. And so that's why we have hashtag ad is the most common way that people make that disclosure. It's not the only way to do it. It's most common because it's the one that the FCC consistently says, please use this or hashtag sponsored. You don't have to use the hashtag. You just have to make it unmissable by somebody looking at whatever the content is. Like, all right, I understand that there's a connection here, and I understand what that connection is.
okay, that makes sense. So, off of that, a new question I got from that was, so oftentimes influencers or people of status that have a big following, they'll invest in companies and then they'll talk about the company in a positive way. And oftentimes they won't disclose that they have any involvement or investment in that company. Do they technically need to disclose that?
Yeah, if I have a financial interest in some brand and I'm promoting it, I that is a material connection that should be disclosed. And the
Okay.
thing is, this is another one of those situations where people will say like, well, what about these hundreds of brands that I see not doing this? How are
Hmm.
they getting away with it? And it's sort of the same answer. There's really big cases that the FTC has brought that are very visible, but
Too
non-compliance is
many.
still such a problem that they and their priorities shifted when COVID hit. They focused more on people selling fake COVID cures and stuff like that. That's like
Mhm.
much more actively harmful than I didn't know that this was an ad kind of thing. But yeah, it's that same situation where yeah, it's a widespread problem, and people at the FTC and at other agencies are spending a lot of effort trying to figure out how to reduce the non-compliance and get people to actually comply with it. So yeah, I mean I know exactly what you're talking about with people not making that connection clear, and it's a risk. That's all it is.
So with that, so if they were to post something and say they talked about it a bunch of different times, do they need to disclose that technically again? Do they need to disclose that every single time they speak about the issue, or would putting in their bio like investor in, is that enough?
Yeah, that's the FTC would say that is not enough, and you would have to do it
Okay,
every single
wow.
time because the concern is people repost stuff and reshare stuff, and if they
True.
don't see, they might see it without seeing the disclosure. That came up in a case involving, I think it was Bounty, about an influencer campaign they ran on TikTok. They're having people like dance with the paper towels and stuff. And in the caption on TikTok, they had their disclosure. But when someone shares that TikTok to a platform like Instagram, the video transfers, but the caption doesn't follow it. And
Oh,
so the claim was, well, you're not making your disclosures, and it's on you to make sure that the disclosure follows the content cross-platform. And so Bounty had to correct what they were doing. But yeah, that's the same sort of issue where, okay, you can have it in the bio, but the FTC's standpoint would be it's possible and probably likely that some people are scrolling through and just see the content and they're not going to click through to see the disclosure in the bio. So you would have to do it every time. Similarly, if you have a story that goes on like multiple slides,
mm,
it's not enough to just have hashtag ad or whatever it is on slide one. You would need it on all the slides and every story and all of that.
wow. Yeah, there are so many people that I see making these issues. That's
I
crazy.
know,
So
I know.
I appreciate you letting me know because now I'm on high alert now for it all the time. But on the note of there just being too much of it, what are some of the biggest things that you see people doing that's illegal very, very frequently? Like beyond the things we've already touched on.
I think especially in social media marketing, publicity rights and not understanding how copyrights work on sort of a basic level. So the publicity rights thing is using someone's image for a commercial purpose without their permission is violating that person's right of publicity. And those kinds of cases are really easy to bring. They're really hard to defend, and they're potentially pretty lucrative for a plaintiff's lawyer. So they're common, and it's an attractive thing to sue over, and it's something that's so easy to screw up. An example would be like if I have a swimsuit brand and I see someone on Instagram has posted on their public profile them wearing the swimsuit, and maybe they've even tagged my brand in their post, and I then take that post and put it on my brand's page. I've violated that person's right of publicity, plain and simple. And it's not like they have to reach out and say, "Hey, can you take that down?" before suing me. There's nothing that would stop them from just filing the lawsuit. Now I have a problem on my hands. And that kind of a related issue to that is taking, there's a copyright problem there too, because whoever took that photo that was on the model's page has the copyright in that image. And if I don't have permission from whoever owns the rights to that photo to repost it on my brand's page, I'm committing copyright infringement by putting it on there. And there's a case going on right now against Volvo that combines both those issues. Basically, a photographer took a photo of a Volvo and a model out in a field, and Volvo reached out to ask permission to repost it, I think is how it started. And the photographer was like, well, let's talk about a licensing fee. And Volvo essentially said, no, we're not going to pay you. And then they just reposted it anyway. And so the model sued for her publicity rights violation because she's recognizable in this photo that now is on a brand page. And the photographer sued for violating his, infringing on his copyright to the picture. And Volvo tried to dismiss the case and lost, and now they're facing a serious problem over this. And that kind of thing happens just all the time. Like I personally know two photographers that had that exact situation happen to them within the last month. And I've helped, well, I'll just say like there it's a common thing for brands to screw up too, where you just think, all right, if I'm tagged in it, then that means I can use
Mm.
it, and that's just not the case.
So any brand, they need like written consent to repurpose the content,
Yeah,
and they also need consent on exactly how they're going to use it.
yeah, yeah. It does. It's not like you need a 20-page contract for all of this. It can be pretty short, and sometimes you can even effectively do it via DM. If you're just like, hey, we love this photo. We'd love to use it in a post on our brand's page. Like, write back yes if that's okay. That's one way to do it. Ideally you have something that's a little bit more robust than that, but sometimes that's not always practicable to do depending on how much content you're trying to use. But yeah, you need
Mhm.
something in writing that says it's okay for you to use this picture of me for this reason.
Okay,
Otherwise,
so and
you know,
so for the scenario that you said, and say they only ask to use it for to post. If they then were to use it in ads, is that violating their rights of
yeah,
publicity or whatever?
yeah,
Okay.
that's a problem that comes up a lot too. Like you'll get a publicity rights release for a limited purpose, and then that influence. I'm thinking of so many examples all at once, but yeah, just to stick to that point, yeah, if it was, can we use it in a post, and then they see their face on a YouTube ad or something, you've gone beyond the scope of the license basically,
Wow.
and so you've violated that agreement, and then you have a publicity rights violation too.
Jeez. So hearing that too, like specific to all the stuff that I deal with very often, it sounds like how do Instagram theme pages not get shut down left, right, and center then? Because it seems like all they do is repurpose content they don't have the right to.
Yeah, I mean they get copyright strikes a lot. There's the thing about theme pages and the workings of Instagram. There's a lot to deal with there. I mean, it depends on how big the page is and what kind of how established they are on Instagram is, I guess, the best way I can get to talking about it. But I mean, they do get disabled and deactivated a lot, especially for copyright issues. And that can come from so many different sources. There's individual people just going through Instagram's forums. And then there's sites like Jukin and Viral Hog, where their entire business model is trying to extort, well, trying to get payments out of people who are using content that they claim to have licenses to. So if you have a successful theme page, you're going to be dealing with copyright strike type issues pretty much constantly.
Wow.
Um, and a lot of them do get shut down, but it's again the situation, and I think a lot of people's frustration with social media platforms more generally is the rules are not enforced the same across the board all the time, especially with things like sexual content. People are like, I did not post any nudity and I was shut down for that reason. And meanwhile, you can think of a million examples of people that where it's like, how is this still on Instagram? It's hard to say exactly how and why all of the content moderation actions that Instagram takes,
It's all over the
why
place.
it's yeah, why it's so scattered. But yeah, I mean, theme pages run risks every time they repost content they didn't create, and I wish I knew exactly how and why Instagram makes all of its decisions, but I can tell you that successful meme pages are dealing with copyright type issues all the time.
Wow. And is there anything that they can do to diminish that risk?
Yeah, you can make sure that the content you use, you have a license to use. It's a matter of
Okay.
doing the rights diligence on the content and figuring out who actually has the rights to be able to license it to you. I mean, that's the safest play, but as we know, a lot of people who run big pages aren't always doing that. But it
No.
seems to me that there's a trend of more and more aggressively policing that kind of thing, and
Okay.
more pages are having to deal with that more frequently.
So my head goes to like Barstool Sports. They only basically repurpose other people's content. So they're supposed to be getting consent every single time?
Yeah, I mean, I assume that Barstool is big enough and sophisticated enough that they are doing a pretty good job of doing all their IP rights clearance because they're just
Okay.
such a big operation now. It's possible that they have, a level of help from Instagram in dealing with all of that. It's hard to
True.
say exactly what goes on. I mean, that's a very valuable page from Instagram's perspective. So who knows what's really going on to sort of give them a bit of a firewall. But I'd be surprised if they don't really think through all the content that they're putting up. I know some
Okay.
people who I know that larger pages are some of the larger pages are making real effort to make sure that they're not stepping in it with repurposed content.
Okay. Okay. That makes total sense. So the last question that I have for you today is, after hearing all this, I'm sure people are concerned about potentially doing things that could cause them legal harm. How can an influencer or somebody working in this space ensure that they're protected and not going against the law?
Yeah, I mean the answer is talk to a lawyer. It's really as simple as that. Like there's a lot of information out there that you can read yourself. To the FTC's credit, they've tried to make their rules more digestible. At the end of 2019, they put out a document called Disclosures 101 for influencers that tries to cover the basics. That's a good starting point to just wrap your mind around the lay of the land and what's okay and what you need to look out for if you're the creator. They have more comprehensive documents on their website if you're the brand or the agency, but it's kind of a slog to read through. Um, I I like to think that my Instagram does a decent job of covering a lot of the issues, and I've tried to cover most of the main ones. But if there's ever a question about is what's the risk of what I'm doing, just reach out to a lawyer in your jurisdiction and ask them. And a lot of the time, it's not going to be incredibly expensive to just get sort of a gut check or isolated issue or something like that. But it's worth at least understanding the risk before you take it.
For sure. So consult a lawyer and follow Rob too. That's actually what I was going to say, was to make sure to follow that for the resource, because I watch all your videos and I always leave with something. So I appreciate you making all those. I appreciate your time today, man. I really appreciate your contribution here, and I hope to have you on here again. And hopefully, I don't have to deal with you from a client perspective too much. Hopefully, I don't get sued.
Yeah,
But thank you so much for your time, man.
yeah. Thanks for having me. This was fun. I'd love to come back.
Awesome, man. All right, thank you so much, and go follow Rob. Thanks for your time, man.
Thank you.